What's up folks, Crush SG here, back with part 2 of my Razor guide. Now in part 1 we explored his skill kit, artifacts, stat priorities and weapon options. Today we'll take a look at how to build a team around him. Now because Razor only brings primary DPS value without much support value, he doesn't play well with split DPS teams or reaction heavy teams that require lots of character swapping. He needs to be on the field to use his burst, and he needs to be using his burst as often as possible to deal as much damage as possible. Thus, the characters best used with him are those who have off-field persistent buffs, skills, and heals so that they can fit into some sort of set-and-forget rotation. Examples of such characters include Fischl, Xiangling, Mona, Bennett, Qiqi, Barbara, Diona, Xingqiu. There are really a lot of them. All of these characters bring some level of off-field persistent support without requiring excessive character swapping. Next, being an electro character who deals more physical damage than electro damage, Razor benefits greatly from the Superconduct debuff, which reduces the target's physical resistance by 40% for between 8 to 10 seconds. This is why almost everyone who runs a Razor main has at least one cryo-based support in the team. The idea is to apply cryo to the targets and Razor will set off Superconduct with his E or during his burst. Any cryo character can fill this role, and the two best ones being Qiqi and Diona because they bring both cryo application and heals to the table, while the rest just kind of bring cryo application and that's it. And yes folks, even Chongyun works too. And I'm not speculating because I actually used him in that specific role for a good while with Barbara as the healer. Now let me go off on a tangent for a bit here. I'll timestamp it so you can skip it if you want. Everyone harps on the fact that Chongyun's E skill converts Razor's fizz damage to cryo, thus making Superconduct useless, and thus all Razor users should avoid Chongyun like the plague. While it is true that Chongyun's conversion can complicate things sometimes, statements like Chongyun gimps Razor or you should never use Chongyun with Razor are a little bit overly dramatic in my opinion. Yes, he converts Razor's damage to cryo, but if you use the right rotation and time your skill use correctly, you can still very much get the full benefits of Superconduct with him on the team. Now here's a clip to help me illustrate this. But before the pitchforks rise, floor 12 of the Abyss is a cryo floor, so doing a test there would kind of defeat the whole purpose of this test. I just needed a target that could survive at least a couple of rotations so I can properly illustrate my point. Anyway, here's the clip, I'll let it run before breaking it down. Okay, so as you can see, Chongyun is my sole cryo in the team. I had Superconduct up all the time and the conversion wasn't an issue at all. Let's go through my rotation. First, I always start the rotation with Chongyun's E. I then switch to Fischl, pop Oz, then to Barbara for her E, and immediately to Razor so Razor gets the 48% attack buff from Barbara's book. I charge Razor's E skill to get my burst up, wait a split second, and I pop my burst. Chongyun's ice field stays on just long enough for me to get a couple of cryo hits in for either Oz or Razor himself to then set off Superconduct and then I just go ham. Now the beauty of this particular rotation and team setup is that everything lines up perfectly. The buffs, the bursts, and all of that. And I can rinse and repeat this over and over again for an indefinite amount of time. Well, technically I only got 2 rotations in on Child, but you get my point. The only problem with this team is that Barbara is level 50 and has terrible gear, so her heals are kinda lacking. I really should show her some love soon. I kinda miss playing this team setup, to be honest. Now, to clarify, I'm not claiming Chongyun is the best cryo support for Razor. Far from it. I'm just making the point that there is nothing wrong with using Chongyun with Razor. You just need to get a rotation going and time it such that Chongyun always drops his E 5 to 6 seconds before Razor pops his burst. Everyone's setup is different, so your exact rotation may differ, but with practice you'll be able to find one that fits. Okay, back to team composition. So we've established that Razor needs 1 cryo on the team for superconduct. Let's move on to energy regen. Now there are 2 ways to approach energy regen. First is if you have Fischl. Now if you have Fischl, you're basically set in virtually all team compositions. Put Fischl with Razor for the electro resonance, make sure you time it such that Oz is up during Razor's burst, and most of the time all it takes is 1 charged E skill after the burst ends to get his burst back up again. And if you build your team right, you won't even need to do this most of the time, because more often than not your burst will be back up before your current burst ends. And on top of this, having electro resonance actually helps regen energy for the rest of the team too. It's like a mini Favonius weapon bonus. And with the right team, you could have everyone's burst skills up by the time Razor's burst ends, and you'll have a very good rotation to work with. Now if you don't have Fischl on the other hand, which you really shouldn't have to worry about now I guess because everyone gets her for free just by doing the current Fischl event, then you'll need to make up for it by choosing the appropriate gear on your supports. Well, I mean, you need to choose the appropriate gear anyway, but gear becomes all that more important if you don't have Fischl. Now, support gear falls into 2 categories, buff gear and energy regen gear. For energy regen, you're looking primarily at the Exile set and the Favonius weapons. The Exile set recovers 6 energy for the entire team when the character equipping it uses their burst. Now because of this, you usually want to put this set on a character with the lowest energy cost burst, something like Chongyun, Ningguang or Ember. Diluc of course works excellently for this, but I guess putting the Exile set on Diluc is almost as bad as me forcing him to lead my expedition party daily, so I'll leave that to your discretion. Next we have Favonius weapons. Now these weapons have a chance to recover energy every time the character lands a crit. At Refine 1 it's a 60% chance on crit, with a 12-second cooldown. At Max Refine, the chance is 100% and the cooldown is only 6 seconds. Now for those new to my channel, I actually didn't realize this team energy recovery mechanic myself until a couple of weeks ago. It was a few of my viewers who brought it to my attention. Anyway, if you have a Favonius weapon lying around, I'd recommend equipping it on a support with a multi-hit skill if possible, such as Ningguang, Chongyun or Diona. The reason for this is because you have a slightly higher chance of landing at least 1 crit if that character has a multi-hit ability versus a single hit one. However, if you don't have the necessary characters, then any character will do. You just need to ensure that you stay on the field with that character long enough until you land a crit before swapping back. And of course, you want to equip that support character with crit rate gear to help things along. Damage doesn't matter for this, only crit rate does. And lastly, there's an important caveat about the Favonius weapons, and that is they only work if the character is on the field when the crit occurs. What this means is that crits from Fischl's Oz or Xiangling's Goba that land while these 2 characters are not on the field do not trigger the Favonius bonus. And this is why the Favonius weapons are not really good on Fischl and Xiangling unless you explicitly stay on the field, do some normal attacks until you get a crit. Okay, moving on to buff gear, we are looking at the Noblesse Oblige set, the Instructor set, and the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, which is a catalyst by the way. Now the Instructor set is probably the least applicable set for a Razor team unless you're trying to build into either an Electrocharge reaction comp or a Shatter comp with the Rain Slasher. Now I know some of you have asked me about Shatter comps in the comment section, and unfortunately while I know how it works, I don't have much personal experience with it, so I can't really comment on those at the moment. I am, however, slowly building up Xingqiu, so I may be able to try some things out in the future with Shatter or Electrocharged. Now this brings us to the Noblesse set, which provides a party-wide 20% attack buff when the character equipping the set uses their burst. I'd recommend having this set on a support that can reliably have their burst up in time with Razor's burst. A good option for this is to put it on Fischl, because with her and Razor on the same team, her burst is going to be up all the time because of Electro Resonance. If you don't have Fischl, just put it on any character, but be sure to use their burst before using Razor's burst, so that Razor gets the buff during his burst. And finally, we have the Thrilling Tales Catalyst. This is a 3-star book that has an amazingly powerful buff. At Refine 1, it provides a 24% attack buff for 10 seconds to the next character you swap to. Now this is why in the clip I showed earlier, Barbara is always the one on the field before Razor. She uses this book. Yes, it's only level 20 cause her damage doesn't matter, but it is Refine 5 which gives 48% attack to Razor every time she swaps to him. That is a huge amount of attack to get from just one 3-star book. Anyway, you get this book from Wish Pools, and it isn't all that impossible for a free-to-play player to get this to Refine 5 with enough time spent playing. But either way, even at Refine 1 and anywhere in between, it's worth considering. Its secondary is also percent HP, so it's kinda made for Barbara if you want to level it up. Alright folks, that's the basics of building a team around Razor. Now let's take a look at my Razor and his team. So this is my Razor. He's been my main since literally day 1. I got him from the beginner banner along with Noelle. He is now level 90, C6, using the Skyward Pride with 2-piece Bloodstain and 2-piece Gladiators. Now if you watch part 1, I did say I was using 2-piece Thundering Fury, and I was indeed at the time. But it seems the RNG gods heard my pleas and finally blessed me with a decent Gladiator feather. Now I'm only 1 piece short from 4-piece Gladiators. Anyway, here are his stats. Okay, let's talk about the different teams that I run him with. First off, Fischl is almost always in his team for the Electro Resonance. I have my Fischl built straight up for Oz damage, Stringless Bow, 2-piece Thundering Fury, and 2-piece Gladiator. Yeah, she's kinda holding on to a Gladiator piece for when I get my 4th piece on Razor. But otherwise, there's nothing specific about Fischl. She's just basically there to give lots of extra damage and provide lots of energy regen for Razor. Now the third member of the team is flexible and changes depending on what I need for the content I'm doing, but this is usually a shield break character, regen, or buff support. The characters I typically run in this slot are Bennett, Klee, Xiangling, or Barbara, but you need to be careful about running pyros with Razor. The extra overload damage is definitely nice on bosses, but it can be really annoying on smaller enemies because overload knocks targets back. Anyway, I did mention in part 1 that I run Klee as a support and some folks were interested in that, so let's take a look at her. Now Klee brings 2 primary functions to my Razor team, or to any of my teams for that matter. I use her on my Noelle team too. Now the first function is pretty much just for some extra opportunistic damage. With Diona's burst in the field constantly applying cryo, having Klee drop a few bombs from time to time can deal nice chunks of melt damage. The second function is her energy regen potential. Between her many little mines triggering all sorts of reactions and the electro resonance generating energy particles from reactions every 5 seconds, Klee is a surprisingly reliable energy battery for the team. Now I only wish I had her at C2 for the 23% defense debuff, but that would have run me way over budget for the Klee banner. Anyway, I have Klee in 4-piece witches, and yes, for those wondering, I am indeed able to stack the full 3 stacks very reliably because I have an R5 sacrificial fragments on her. But I'm not too particular about that, to be honest, for Klee, because she is a support for the most part, though she can certainly bring the pain as the primary DPS as shown in my Diona review, if and when I choose to use her in that role. Don't sniff at the sacrificial fragments, folks. It's a good catalyst on Klee, the way I run her at least. And finally we come to the necessary cryo for Superconduct. Now this spot was filled by Qiqi for a long time. Qiqi's strength lies in the fact that A, her E skill persists on Razor after swapping and constantly heals him while applying cryo to targets at regular intervals. As mentioned, Razor is pretty paper, so he needs the healing. And B, she is an absolute beast of a healer with high attack 4-piece maidens. So for all intents and purposes, Qiqi is probably the best overall cryo support in the game for Razor. Her kit is built to support all of Razor's field hogging needs. The only downside to Qiqi is the long cooldown of her E skill. It's difficult to work into a consistent rotations, and I would often have to go through alternate rotations without heals, which is kinda risky with Razor. And that's where Diona comes in. Now I'm not going to go too in-depth into Diona because this video is already long enough. So if you want to know more about Diona, check out my review on her. The card is in the top right corner and the link is in the description. So just how did a 4-star character without a dedicated heal in her E skill manage to bench Qiqi? It's simple. She generates shields, has heals, and most importantly, her burst fits perfectly into my Razor's rotation. And it persists while she is off field. Between her C1, the Favonia's Warbow, and the Electro Resonance from Razor and Fischl, her burst is up practically every single burst rotation, so she provides my Razor team with what Qiqi couldn't. Consistent rotations with heals and a shield. Sure, her heal strength is nothing compared to Qiqi's, but her shield makes it such that the extra healing isn't really necessary, and while I still haven't 9-starred floor 12 or anything like that, clearing floor 12 is now significantly easier because both my teams are essentially complete. Alright folks, that brings us to the end of my Razor guide. I hope I was able to add at least some value to the already very saturated pool of Razor information on YouTube. For those of you who have been asking, yes, I do have plans for more in-depth guides in the future. It just takes a lot of time to do these kinds of guides, so it may be a few days or even a week before I get into my next one. Anyway, as always, thumbs up if you liked the video, thumbs down if you didn't, share my videos with your friends, and crush that subscribe button for more Genshin content. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Wow, really? Crush that subscribe button? That's what you came up with?